This is the Bryan Hyde Show.
Well, hello there. Welcome to the show. Hey, glad you could join me today. Man, I'll tell you, some days I just feel like I am swimming upstream. And, you know, this is not poor, pitiful me, but sometimes I really feel like this is really doing no good whatsoever. Okay, let me get this off my chest. Sorry, gonna bare my soul here just a little bit for those who have the time or interest to listen. So the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. yesterday passed what is euphemistically being called the Big Beautiful Bill. And it contains various measures of tax cuts and some stimulus. And the Republicans are congratulating themselves on, oh, this is wonderful. This is exactly what we need to get our nation back on its feet. And, you know, this is part of Trump's, big plan for America. And anyone who has questioned it, Thomas Massie, Senator Rand Paul, looking in their direction, well, they're being challenged as well. They're being obstructionists. They're just grandstanding. They're standing in the way of progress in Trump. And here's the problem that I have. Yes, this bill would do targeted tax cuts, right? So if you work in the service industry, if you're a waiter or waitress, or you work for tips, well, we're not going to tax those tips anymore, and that's great, except why is government picking winners and losers in the workforce? No, really, honestly, I'd like to see everybody's taxes reduced, especially their income tax, but this seems like a strange way to go about it. Secondly, and for me, this is the worst part. Sorry, I've got to get this off my chest. There will be more spending in fiscal year 25 than there was for fiscal year 24 at the federal level. Now, you think about how DOGE came out, swinging 4 months ago, and man, they started uncovering all of these examples of, fraud and waste and duplication and just trillions of taxpayer dollars being wasted over and over and over again. And of course, there were mass layoffs, and there were great reductions in spending, and there were reductions, in terms of grants going out to various agencies. And of course, it sparked some pretty interesting legal battles as well. But the bottom line, inescapable conclusion is that the Republicans did nothing to stop spending on the very same things that the Joe Biden administration was spending on. So what are we to make of this? I mean, they're telling us, well, we have a battle to fight, and right now it's very important we pass this, I don't even know what to call it. The Big Beautiful Bill is nice, but it's also very euphemistic and doesn't really tell us what all's in there. And I'm hearing rumors, and this appears to be true. Also tucked into that Big Beautiful Bill is a repeal of the National Firearms Act, meaning silencers, suppressors, should be off the NFA list if this were to pass the Senate and be signed into law by President Trump. And yeah, as a gun owner, I get excited. Ooh, hey, man, hearing protection made legal without having to register yourself with the federal government and pay a tax and so forth. I think it's just a big show. And I think the Republicans saying, well, 5 years from now, we will be responsible. We'll be fiscally responsible. But for now, we got to do what we got to do. You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like people who are abandoning principle for the sake of some perceived short-term gain that in no way can they be held accountable for, because, well, the target date's still 5 years down the road. And Thomas Massie pointed this out, and I think it's a very painful truth. So if you're a hardcore Trump supporter, brace yourself. You're going to feel like somebody just backhanded you across the face. But what mechanism is there to ensure that Congress 5 years from now will be that fiscally responsible entity that will be held to the promises made by a flexible Congress, at least flexible in its principles, 5 years ago? Come on, you know the answer to this. Where have we seen this before? Promise, promise, promise. This is what we're going to do. And then they kick the can down the road. Yes, I'm disappointed too. In fact, disappointed is putting it pretty mild. I'm understating it. Like, yes, the Arctic can be chilly at certain times of the year. That's an understatement as well. The ocean can be moist. Yeah. But the bottom line is nothing is changing. And look, I want Trump to succeed in the sense that the people who were trying to put him out of business, put him in jail, kill him, take all of his property, they need to be opposed. But if you are operating under the impression that, oh boy, this is it, this is our chance, this is going to save us as a country, I would urge you to revisit that supposition and really check it out and see, is that the case, or is this just something we're telling ourselves? Is this a story that we're telling ourselves, akin to whistling past the graveyard, and it's all going to be okay, you'll see, everything's going to work out? I don't think it is. And I'm not saying we're doomed. I'm just saying the possibility of a political savior is becoming more unlikely. And yes, I should have known better. I've been watching this stuff for a long time, 30 years at least. And I still hoped. I still was like, oh man, I got my hopium going. It's getting harder to maintain that illusion, though. Which leaves us in kind of an interesting spot. Okay, we can see that what's going on is not sustainable. The spending is out of control. The Republicans refuse to cut spending. By the way, there's a great meme that I'm including in today's show notes at the Bryan Hyde Show. It's a book titled, "Well, That Didn't Shrink Government," subtitle, "An Abbreviated History of Voting Republican." This is in no way saying, yes, the Democrats would be a better choice. It's acknowledging the reality that for all the talk, it's just talk. Right now, the Republican establishment is slightly not as bad as their Democratic counterparts. But clearly, Congress has to have the will to do something if anything is going to change. And I'm not faulting the people within the Doge team. Frankly, I've seen a couple of interviews of Elon Musk in the last week or so, and I'm going to be blunt. That dude looks pissed. He looks upset that, he came out swinging. I think the Doge team came in and uncovered a lot of stuff that was very inconvenient. Of course, most of that's kind of been buried, and our memory cycle is short enough that people don't really, tend to dwell on it. But all he could do, because Doge is simply an advisory council, is offer recommendations and data to Congress and the executive branch in the hopes that they would act on it. Okay, well, I'm just going to suggest this. Look at the actions that they're taking. This is not to say that everything Trump is doing is bad, but he is still doing some things that are not keeping government restrained, that are not cutting spending, that are not encouraging fiscal responsibility, or for that matter, the federal government staying in its own lane. It's not sustainable. And it sounds like Musk is probably going to exit Doge sooner than not. I know they had talked about $1 trillion in savings. In fact, at one point, I think I heard the term $2 trillion come up, but that has been rolled back. And now Musk is saying, okay, it'll probably be more in the neighborhood of $160 billion of saving the first year. And I know he's being taken to task. Well, why didn't you do this? Why weren't you able to do this sooner? Why are you failing? Hey, it's been 4 months. And again, all he can do is advise, but Congress has to take that advice. And Congress holds the purse strings. And right now it appears they're not willing to act. So can you blame him? Besides the fact he's kind of been thrown under the bus, his Tesla dealerships, the Tesla dealerships are being attacked, and Tesla's being vandalized and burned and cursed out, when they're driving in traffic. Talk about misdirected anger. Anyway, I'm sorry to be starting on such a negative note, but I have some positive things to share with you too. I just want to just point out that I don't like this truth either. I wish that it were different. But no cause was ever won by a refusal to face the truth. And the truth is, the Republicans are not fixing things. Now, they're not making things as bad as their Democratic counterparts would have done, but that's not the same thing as actually fixing the problem. I hope that makes sense. I'm not telling you to give up. I'm just saying the stuff that most people are being directed to look toward as the solution, it's clearly not working. And it's not going to, as long as the people in Congress realize, and this is on the Republican side, that spending is their connection to power. And that's why they will not make the cuts. And that's why they will not make the reforms necessary to rein in that federal Leviathan. So what does that leave us? Well, for what it's worth, I think it leaves us in a position where this corrupt, rotted system is going to have to collapse under its own weight. And it will do so. Historically, that is always the case. When you have a government that recognizes no meaningful limits on its power, when it debases the currency, when it seeks absolute control, it sets itself up to fall. We will be no different. I don't care how exceptional you think the U.S. is. We will see our government and those structures crumble. So now the question is, what are you doing in the meantime? Because I'm not talking about a Mad Max type existence. There will probably be some time when you really have to buckle down and pay attention to what's going on and be very self-sufficient. In fact, I'm including my article of the day today is from Madge Waggy. I picked this one up off of LouRockwell.com earlier this morning. And it's an article on what to do when martial law comes to America. Now, again, I realize, Bryan, martial law is never going to come to America. And yet it has in the past. Specifically, when the so-called Civil War, when Lincoln's War of Northern Aggression began, there was a great deal of unrest and martial law declared in Union states because they were drafting people who did not want to be drafted to go fight, the South. It's very likely that we are going to see martial law enacted for the purpose of whatever, protecting what remains of the power structure, whatever it may be. Maybe it's an economic disturbance, but know this, the military has been preparing for massive social uprisings for a very long time. This is what Madge Waggy tells us. And this is in the context of an America that is more divided than most of us have probably seen in our lives. Now, Madge says, during difficult times, we must safeguard the values and interests of the American people. But manufacturing nationwide protests during confusing times may be just what some might wish for in order to divide and destabilize the country in exchange for the ability to control us at all the time. So if we don't comply with their desires, well, then we'll face dire consequences, as the infamous Zbigniew Brzezinski, the imperialist, globalist warmonger and former policy advisor to Obama, said, "Today it's infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people." That's his words. That's how they think. So under martial law, you could be tried for crimes, denied your right to a speedy trial. You won't be tried by a jury of your peers. The military will be judge, jury, and jailer. Now, in 1866, the Supreme Court ruled there could be no military trials for U.S. citizens. But should martial law come, Madge Waggy says you need to be prepared because a lot of stuff that isn't a crime currently could be. For instance, everything you own could become federal property, especially guns and food stockpiles, which will be the first to be confiscated. Curfews will be the new normal. Access to food, water, and other resources could be rationed. There will be sky-high inflation. Everyone will look suspicious. Just a chit-chat with your neighbor about the wrong things could put you in hot water. And there will be no access to free internet, while the free press and freedom of speech will be things of the past. Now, Madge goes on to give us 6 golden rules of surviving martial law. I'll just walk through those quickly. You can check out the article at thebryanhydeshow.com. These are show notes for May 22nd, 2025. But this is pretty solid advice, and she expands on this pretty good. First and foremost, she says, talk with no one, trust no one. That's a hard one, I think, for most of us, because we don't want to lone wolf McQuade our way through tough times. But you need to be very careful about what you say and to whom you say it. Secondly, renew your supplies constantly. Make sure you have a basic martial law survival kit, especially if you are going to stay put. Also, avoid getting in the way of law enforcement or the military. I know there are people like, well, I'll get out there and I'll fight tyranny. And you know what? Everybody's going to have to make that decision at some point. You want to go outside and face the music? Well, that's a choice you're going to have to weigh, but you've got to be able to stay up to date with the news. So you've got to have some means of gaining information. It could be by shortwave radio. It could be, I don't know, walkie-talkie. Who knows? Maybe we go back to print papers. but you need to be up to date. You need to cautiously develop a survival network, and you need to inspect and know your surroundings by heart. There's a lot more here, but the prospect of nationwide martial law, it's not off the table. And it's something that I would think smart people would at least consider as a possibility beforehand. Also, I'm including in today's show notes an article. This is from actually 5 years ago. It's from Barry Brownstein. Safety is found in principles, not lies. Here's a quick quote from it. Safety lies in the strength of our belief in strict limits on government power, rule of law, and stable property rights. Honor these principles and safety will emerge from the actions of a free people, not the edicts of authoritarians. Now remember, when he wrote this, we were in the midst of lockdowns and all kinds of interesting machinations on the part of people in power at various levels. And it was not good. But people would comply because they wanted to do it out of safety, or, the condition, well, this will protect me. That's why I'm going to take the jab. That's why I'm going to wear the mask. That's why I'm going to separate or distance myself 6 feet from everybody. I would encourage you, read Barry Brownstein's article. It's got to be one of the best ones on, first of all, pointing out what safetyism is and how it almost becomes like a cult-like ideal that people are willing to suspend reality in pursuit of safety. You saw this in spades during the COVID pandemic. But there's also the prospect of, how do you hang on to your principles? I think if we learned anything from 5 years ago, it was that you cannot comply your way out of tyranny. There is no way you can follow the rules closely enough that the tyrants will say, okay, well, you did it. I guess we have to give up. They'll just move the goalposts and keep on trying. By the way, one of the things that I love from this article is that Barry Brownstein quotes from Milton Meyer's book, They Thought They Were Free. This is talking about the German people from 1933 to 1945. If you haven't read this book, can I just recommend take a look at it? And if you're like any of the people I've recommended this book to, and frankly, this was my reaction when I read it too, it will open your eyes in a very clear way to just how easily people can be persuaded to go along with tyrannical governmental policies. And it's not because it all came at once. If something had happened with one great big, shove, people would have stood up. Yes, even in Germany, they would have stood up and said, oh, no. Well, wait a minute. That's just crazy. But it came a little bit at a time. It came on cat's feet. And people instead would say, well, this latest edict isn't that much more radical than the one that came before, and you didn't protest then, so, why are you making a big deal out of this one? And it's just that death by 1,000 cuts, little bits at a time, that gets people to the point where suddenly they wake up and they look around and they say, I don't recognize the country that I'm in. One of the most chilling examples that Meyer shares in his book, They Thought They Were Free, was a German professor who said, I heard the talk, among colleagues at the university and so forth, but he says, I wasn't a Nazi party member and I wasn't, gung-ho, hey, here we go, click the heels and, but he said, walking down the street one day, this professor was walking with his 5-year-old son and they passed a Jewish man. And the little 5-year-old sneered, Jewish swine. And that was the moment that this professor was like, whoa, what the hell have we become? Now, I don't know what it would take to wake people up today, but I'm telling you, this book is one of the best examples of how people can be led with their own consent into some very dark and dangerous places. And safetyism was a big part of why the Nazis were able to seize the amount of power that they had. Hey, we're here to protect you. What are you protecting us from? Well, financial collapse. Oh, okay. What else? Well, from Bolshevism. Oh, yes, of course. How about we're protecting you from terrorism? Oh, that's right. Someone burned the Reichstag. Yeah. So, your safety is found in principles, not in lies. But the problem is that puts on your shoulders and my shoulders. We have to be the kind of people who can sift truth from error, lies from truth, etc. That's a tall order. But I'm here to tell you, you are up to it. All right, one last thing, and this is, I probably should have let out with this, but I want to end on a high note, and this is, I think, very solid information. This is from a friend of mine who is a licensed therapist. And I've always enjoyed his take on things. I think he really is a good person who is there to help people and not basically fill their heads with pseudo-religion, which is kind of what the psychiatric wing of government has become. But he talks about what do we do with the past that we can't change? And I don't know if you've ever felt this before, but he says, this is a question I ask myself. What do we do when the person we used to be haunts the person we are now trying to become? What if the apologies have already been made, but the wounds haven't fully healed? And here he brings up something that this is taught in 12-step programs, but he brings up something called living amends. This is not just saying I'm sorry. This is becoming someone new. In other words, it's showing up every day in a way that honors the pain of the past, not by erasing it, but by transforming how we live in the present. So, for example, he says, I've apologized where I can. I've owned what I've done. If there's restitution to be made, I want to make it. But sometimes, even when there's some healing, the scars remain. And in those moments, the only thing I can do and offer is my ongoing willingness to be better. By the way, he quotes a psalm here. This is Psalm 51, verse 10. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. So he asks, does living amends heal everyone I've hurt? No. Does it undo what's been done? No, it can't. But what it does, something truly sacred, is it brings dignity to the sorrow. It brings direction to the wandering. It says, I see it, I caused it, and I will not stop trying to be someone who brings peace instead of pain. And he's got some other great stuff here too. I've got a link to this in my show notes at thebryanhydeshow.com. There's one final thought here, and this is a quote from Viktor Frankl. For anyone carrying regret, if you've made mistakes and you're still haunted by them, please hear this. And here's Viktor Frankl's words. You are not your worst moment. You are not the sum of your failures. You are still capable of love, growth, and grace. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That's some pretty powerful stuff, huh? That's why I'm including it in my show notes today and encouraging you to be optimistic as we move forward. We're not going to be able to count on government. Okay, we probably should have known that from the beginning, but we can still count on our Creator as we have always been able to count on Him. So maybe we ought to give that a try. See how that works out.
This is the Bryan Hyde Show.